Security Council expresses concern about failure to extend the truce and urges parties to engage in political negotiations. The U.S. Special Envoy Tim King blames the Iran-backed Houthis for undermining truce efforts. School teachers in Taiz suffer hard living conditions due to the war. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fouad. Members of the Security Council expressed their deep disappointment at the passing of the deadline to extend Yemen truce by 6 months. The Council reiterated that returning to engaging in negotiations and reinstating truce is the route to permanently ending the war and resolving Yemen's humanitarian and economic crisis. The UN Security Council has sanctioned another 3 Houthi leaders. According to a statement of the sanction panel, the officials are Mansour al-Saadi of the Houthi Navy and Mutlaq Amir of the National Security of the Houthi Militia, in addition to the commander of the Houthi Air Force, Ahmed al-Hamzi. Informed sources revealed that Iran was responsible for smuggling more than 35 foreign military experts into Saada Governorate. The sources reported that the foreign experts are professionals in the fields of drone flight, ballistic missiles, modification and development of solid and liquid fuels for ballistic missiles, advanced computer software, and systems and guerrilla warfare leadership and training. Head of the Presidential Leadership Council, Rashad Al-Alimi, reiterated the Council and government's adherence to the just and comprehensive peace approach. This came in a joint meeting of the Presidential Command Council, where the Council expressed its deep regret at the failure of the efforts of the United Nations Special Envoy Hans Gumberg to extend the armistice due to the erasure of the Houthi militia. The President praised the position and unity of the international community on the Yemeni issue, but said that this position is not enough to deter these militia and their supporters. The U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim King, blamed the Houthi militia for obstructing the extension of the UN truce in the country. King urged the Houthis to show more flexibility towards efforts to extend the truce, which could be the stepping stone to a permanent peace in Yemen. This report gives more details.
Yemen's warring parties failed to reach an agreement on Sunday to prolong the country's 6-month-long ceasefire, threatening to rekindle the country's horrific civil war. The U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim King, blamed the recent failure to prolong the country's truce agreement on rebel Houthi leaders, accusing them of making last-minute maximalist demands that disrupted constructive discussions. During a press briefing, U.S. Special Envoy to Yemen said the Houthis hijacked the discussions by abruptly demanding that their military and security forces be paid before Yemeni government employees. King provided no additional explanation for the failure of the discussions. The devastation began in 2014 when the Iranian-backed Houthi troops captured Sana'a and parts of northern Yemen, forcing the government into exile. Following the expiration of the ceasefire deadline, sporadic exchanges of fire were reported in the western governorate of Al-Dala, as both sides deployed military reinforcements in the frontline cities of Ma'rib and Taiz. According to Houthi officials, the main impediment to discussions was the UN's refusal to offer written guarantees for some of the group's demands. The demands including the payment of staff wages as well as the reopening of Sana'a airport and the Houthi-held port of Hodeidah. The initial terms of the April truce called for the partial reopening of the capital's airport and the Red Sea port of Hodeidah, as well as the removal of the Houthi blockade on Taiz, the country's third biggest city. However, conflicts over the opening and control of Taiz's main access roads have kept the city under Houthi siege. Both parties have reported multiple violations of the ceasefire agreement signed in April. In recent years, the Houthi forces have used an increasingly effective array of weaponry against Saudi Arabia and other adversaries, including cruise missiles and drones similar to those made by Iran. Many of these larger weapons were displayed in a Houthi military parade in late September. According to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, the conflict, which has recently evolved into a regional proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, has killed over 150,000 people, including over 14,500 civilians. The battle has plunged Yemen into one of the world's greatest humanitarian crises, driving it further into poverty and dangerously close to starvation.
Houthis rejection of truce extension comes at a time when its backer, Iran, is facing growing internal pressure from nationwide protests and international criticism over its domestic crackdown. The Fang Report has more details.
The Houthis' decision to reject the extension of the United Nations brokered truce on October the 2nd is no surprise. Under mounting pressure from the United Nations over its faltering commitment to the agreement, the Iran-backed Houthi militia favored disengagement from the process and a return to violence. Within hours of the truce expiration, a Houthi spokesperson implied there could be attacks on Saudi Arabia and UAE installations, and violent confrontations erupted north of the city of Taiz as the militia attempted to infiltrate army positions. Although the truce, which began on April the 2nd and was extended twice, was successful in significantly reducing violence, Houthi violations have been gradually increasing. They've completely refused to lift their humanitarian blockade of Taiz, proposing to open roads that would advance their military aims instead of expanding humanitarian access. The escalation and rejection of international initiatives have coincided with increasing internal and international pressure on Iran following the brutal death of Mahsa Amini. The growing chorus of global criticism of Tehran is creating a significant threat to the Iranian regime, likely strengthening the strategic alliance between the Houthis and the Islamic Republic. The UN Special Envoy Hans Grunberg had presented a comprehensive plan on releasing detainees, relieving a Houthi siege of Taiz, adding additional destinations for flights from the Houthi-controlled Sana'a airport, and urging the Saudi coalition to remove restrictions on the entry of fuel ships into the port of Hodeidah. All of this, as well as a nationwide and regional ceasefire and the start of an inclusive political process, was presumed to be in the works. However, given the Houthis' control of key cities in northern Yemen, they have no incentive to share power. The international community must pressure the Houthis to accept the truce and cease hostilities. The United Nations needs to reconsider its strategy, as attempts to appease the Houthis will only embolden the leadership to continue rejecting the truce.
The Yemeni landmine monitor announced that 2 children were killed by a mine explosion in Ma'rib Governorate. On the other hand, the government forces intercepted the Houthi drone south of Ma'rib. The media center of the armed forces said that the incident came less than 12 hours after the army forces downed another drone east of Taiz. A violent explosion targeted a security point in Lahj Governorate, southern Yemen, causing casualties. In Abdallah, 2 members of the Houthi militia were killed in a military operation carried out by the joint forces. An explosive device exploded in a civilian car in Taiz city. Sources confirmed that the explosive device had been planted in the car, which exploded at once, wounding 2 citizens.
This is an act of terrorism. I do not know who has done that. Authorities are able to detect the one behind that through the cameras. I do not accuse anybody. I do not have any enemies. I was sitting and suddenly I heard the car explosion in front of the restaurant. They said that the car exploded due to an explosive device that was planted into it. One has been injured and was sent to the hospital.
School teachers across the country face their humanitarian situation. Intaj Shahab Al-Aghbari is a volunteer teacher who has been suffering from kidney failure for 10 years. He cannot afford paying for medication as his salary is very low. This report has more details.
Every morning, he begins the school day with a positive spirit that emanates from a deep sense of responsibility toward the uprising generations. Teacher Shahab Al-Aghbari moves from the school queue to the classroom, teaching the students and giving activities. He exerts these great efforts without fatigue in spite of his ailing body.
In the Teachers' Day, they have to give teachers their rights. The salary is very low. We call on the authorities to raise salaries of teachers and to credit their positions. The teacher is the basis for these young people who will be coming generation.
Shahab Al-Aghbari leaves the school in which he works for the dialysis center in Athawra General Hospital in Taiz. For more than 10 years, Shahab has been suffering from kidney failure and needs dialysis twice a week. Despite that, the disease did not deter the teacher from assuming his responsibility.
طبعا شهاب قاسم الأغبري إحدى مرضى الفشل الكلوي.
Teacher Shihab Al-Aghbari is one of the patients diagnosed with kidney failure. Come to run dialysis twice a week for more than 10 years on. He is a volunteer teacher who works in the service of our students in Salah ad-Din school. He is persistent in his work and has many activities.
Shihab is an example of the daily suffering incurred by the Yemeni teacher on the World Teachers' Day.
من وزارة التربية والتعليم من الحكومة بشكل عام.
Teachers should be honored from the government in their day. Regretfully, there isn't even a word to honor them.
بدل أن نفرح بهذا العيد أصبح لدينا مأساة.
Instead of feeling the joy of the day of the teacher, we feel our pains. As to the salary, it's very low. It's not enough for even a week. We come to the school carrying the burdens of life with us. How can I stand in front of my students who are happy and I do not have a salary that is enough for me and for my children?
Teachers' Day has become a painful memory that renewed the tragedy. The salary is no longer a salary, and the situation is worse for tens of thousands of teachers who suffer from interruption in the payment of their salaries and who are unable to secure a life for their families.
Coming next. New report warns that Yemen is facing a looming environmental battle amid the conflict. A human rights organization revealed the death of dozens of children with cancer in Sana'a due to a corrupt dose of treatment during the past week. The Yemeni Organization for Combating Trafficking in Human Beings stated that Houthi Ministry of Health handed an expired dose of treatment to patients after amending validity date at the Kuwait Hospital for Children with Cancer. The number of African migrants arriving into Yemen has increased by 14.7% during September 2022. The Organization for Migration in Yemen said more than 47,000 African migrants entered the country between January and September this year. The organization added that the Ethiopians made up the majority of immigrants by 91%, while the Somalis make about 9%. The Houthi militia in Sana'a began imposing coercive measures against merchants to extract a percentage of their money. A Houthi direction restricted merchants whose annual commercial activities amount to approximately 50 million riyals in preparation for extracting the tax approved on them. A recent report has warned that Yemen would face a looming environmental disaster. According to the report, the mass destruction caused by a decade of conflict poses a real threat on climate change in the country. This report gives more details.
Climate change, along with widespread environmental devastation caused by over a decade of fighting, threatens to worsen Yemen's already existing conflicts. The violence has resulted in the depletion of vital resources such as water and agricultural land, as well as the loss of livelihoods and forced displacement. In its new report, Risking the Future, Climate Change, Environmental Destruction and Conflict in Yemen, the Center for Civilians in Conflict, or CIVIC, warns that these factors can potentially lead to new conflicts in Yemen. According to the report's author, even if the fighting in Yemen were to stop today, Yemenis would have to prepare for a new battle, the struggle against climate change. For decades to come, the country's land and water supplies will wear the environment's wounds of conflict. According to a study by CIVIC, the cumulative impact of climate change and environmental degradation induced by combat are endangering Yemenis' rights to life, food, and water. People in Yemen are frequently compelled to relocate due to a lack of natural resources and livelihoods, and tensions may arise between the displaced and host groups, leading to local disputes and conflicts. This, however, is not a new problem in Yemen. Access to water and land was identified as a major source of conflict as early as 2010. This is likely to worsen as warring parties have directly attacked food and water infrastructure, as well as threatened farmland and water sources by laying landmines on or near these critical resources. Women, children, and displaced people are especially exposed to climate change, resource constraints, and other threats. Women and girls, who are largely responsible for obtaining water, must walk great distances and are more likely to stumble on landmines. CIVIC urges the Yemeni government to establish mechanisms to effectively manage water and food resources, to address water and land scarcity caused by landmines, and to develop a process for resolving community-level conflicts over resource sharing. CIVIC further urges the Office of the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen to include and prioritize a strategy to address the impact of climate change, environmental degradation, and resource shortages conflicts in any peace process.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Security Council expresses concern about failure to extend the truce and urge parties to engage in political negotiations. The U.S. Pasha envoy Tim King blames the Iran-backed Houthis for undermining truce efforts. School teachers in Taiz suffer hard living conditions due to the war. This is the end of the news. It was Rushan Foe. Thank you for watching.